following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. Hello, listeners around the world on radio, streaming, and podcast services. This is It's Not Therapy. I'm Liana, and I am not a therapist, but I am your source for navigating the madness of mental health. Use my top 10 sayings for going good crazy. This week, we're talking about what's missing from masculinity. This episode was inspired by me reading the book Far Horizons, A Journey from War to Peace by Tait. No relation to those Taits. No, Tait is a veteran of the Iraq War. He began his service with the Australian Navy when he was only 17 years old. Before that, he was raised in a Christian conservative household. Well, Dad took the boys hunting, and they didn't do any of those mamby-pamby liberal things that make men weak, right? You can hear the sarcasm in my voice. What I liked about the book wasn't just that it had a lot of great action or how it spanned the globe, but I also enjoyed how Aaron presented his slow realization that his youthful understanding of bravery and service, well, it didn't survive first contact with the realities of war. Far Horizons is a personal memoir, but it also deals with the generational struggle of men and boys to figure out where they fit in the world, both physically and emotionally. Aaron will be with us for the interview a bit later. You're not going to want to miss that. But first, some setup from me. Every generation of men, and I have tracked this, every single one, definitely going back to like even World War I. Every generation of men is accused of being lazy, weak, and soft by the one before it. Meanwhile, younger generations are bearing the increasing brunt of compounding intergenerational trauma and rapidly changing requirements regarding work and interpersonal skills. Many countries are facing historic youth unemployment, and here in Canada, sources of jobs in car manufacturing, steel and aluminum and lumber, due to tariffs, never mind reductions in jobs in the oil and gas sector due to automation. These are all creating unique combinations of challenges, especially for, the male-dominated workforces in these fields. The gig economy means that jobs with sick days, paid vacations, and other employee benefits are becoming scarcer, and we all know the cost of everything is going up. Women are dropping out of the workforce to care for children and aging loved ones at a pretty alarming pace because the cost of professional carers isn't feasible. And this is treated like a problem for women, and it is, but it puts extra pressure on these women's partners as well, since the partner is now the only income earner. And women continue to be treated like natural experts on emotions, while men are assumed to be impaired in that department. And the science is more complex than that. Studies have shown that women are not more emotional overall than men, undercutting the false reasoning for labeling emotional expression in men as weakness. Similarly, women display more, I'll call it emotional intelligence than men, but men process distress more efficiently than women on average. Differences obviously vary wildly from individual to individual, meaning that any given man could be better at expressing empathy than a given woman, and conversely, an individual woman could be better at emotional problem solving than her male friend. I'll get to the reasons why these gender divides exist later. Keep listening, but these generalities regarding gender and emotional ability, emotional skills, they're not useful at predicting at the individual level. And there's nothing really natural about them. It could all be explained by socialization. In other words, the emotional boxes that men and women get stuffed into our entire lives. In fact, when scientists look at, say, only CEOs, the gender differences in emotional skills disappear. This suggests there's a lot of nurture, training here, as opposed to anything being straight up nature. We also know that it's not that men on average are less good at identifying emotions in other people. It's very likely that men are just discouraged from expressing emotions seen as more vulnerable, like sadness or fear, while women are socially penalized for being perceived as angry. One side doesn't have it better or worse. It's just different restrictions. But there's a lot of mainstream dialogue about the challenge facing women and girls, whereas discussing men's issues gets lumped in with the manosphere, hence me having to say that my author guest Tait is not any relation to that other Tait guy. I try to discuss men's issues when I can, not just on Men's Mental Health Month in June. And just this week, because I do content every Monday, I call it Manly Monday, on YouTube, just this week, I got accused of not being a feminist. Why that was valid with men's issues. But anyway, I got accused of not being a feminist because I did a video encouraging men to set healthy internal boundaries regarding internalizing other people's perceptions of them. The commenter flat out said that if men have problems, if they're sad, it's their own fault and they should just stop crying about it. No, seriously, that was this person's big genius solution. When the issue isn't that men are crying all the time, the bigger issue is a lot of guys don't cry in the first place. They might drink, use drugs, be avoidant, distract themselves on their phones, lash out, wreck stuff, even self-harm. But they don't cry because people like the one who insisted I was not a feminist because I do men's content, this person who was big on feminism made crying into an inherently weak and shameful thing that people should just stop. And let's face it, we're better at encouraging anger in women, when it's convenient and not at us, than crying in men because socially we see anger as tough and tears as weak. And that's not helping gender relations at all. And the opposite is often true. For example, when someone yells at another person or calls them names, instead of just admitting that their feelings got hurt, it's not tougher to seem angry. It would be braver to admit the hurt. Some people spend their entire life at war, even though they never actually see combat, just because they're not able to stop and take stock of what's really going on inside them. And so they spend their lives running from the thing they won't even look at and being in constant conflict with other people. This isn't toughness. It's self-destruction. These people neglect mental, emotional, and physical pain, and eventually that catches up to you. And again, there's a lot of things about how women do it, how women just give away too much of themselves, caring for other people. We don't talk as much about how men wear themselves down, don't respect their own bodies, their own hearts, even their own minds. It's just, how do you serve? How do you do your duty? Well, you can't assist another person, to use the airplane metaphor. Apologies to those flying in the US right now, yikes. But that whole put on your own mask before assisting another passenger? That's true in life. Which is why I'm glad that books like Far Horizons, A Journey from War to Peace by Tait exist. It's not a mental health book. It's not. You'll hear me say a lot in the video, it's like Tom Clancy, which was right up my alley. But not only did I really like the book, I wanted to have Aaron on precisely because these life choices don't happen in a therapist's office. Interviews like this are why I call this show It's Not Therapy. These choices, these moments in life, they're what it's about, But he'll be here after the break to discuss his book. I don't want to get too ahead of things here because he's the best guy to share why he decided to share such deeply personal parts of his life and how he's redefined masculinity for himself as he's traveled the globe, first going to war, then working for peace. Again, I really, really enjoyed this book. Do you have a story do you think would be good for the show? Do you have a book you want me to read? Are you interested in sponsoring the show? NotTherapyShow.com is the website. Liana at NotTherapyShow.com is my email. At NotTherapyShow on social media. When we come back, Erin Tait, author of Far Horizons, A Journey of War to Peace, talking about, among other things, what's missing from masculinity on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back and It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. We are still talking about masculinity. We do this every so often. It's a big topic of mine. I do Manly Mondays every Monday on YouTube. Our guest, as I said off the top, is Erin Tait, author of Far Horizon, a book that I started reading because Erin, I got it from your publicist, and then I couldn't put it down. So wonderful job on it. You'll probably do a better job than me introducing who you are and what the book's about, because it goes through a lot. So what is Far Horizons about?
Thanks, Liana. Great to be here. This is a book that starts on September 11. I was a 17-year-old military officer when that horrific event happened, and I deployed to the Middle East to war the next day. So the book begins there, and then the book finishes in a very, very different place 7 years later. So it's boy to man, it's fighter to peacemaker, it's eat, pray, love with guns.
I love with guns. Okay. Now it actually starts earlier than September 11th because you deal with the story from your childhood, the hunting trip.
Chapter 2, I go back and talk about a moment where my first hunt, kind of a rite of passage with my father in the mountains of New Zealand.
Yeah, and it's scary. And it's disturbing, and it's one of those masculine tropes, right? I mean, the God of War game uses the exact same story of the son's first kill and how difficult it is. But the metaphor there was sort of pushing down your own feelings, denying your own needs, not listening to your own gut. Be a man, do what men do. And that's where I'd like to start. Go ahead.
My father was a man's man, is a man's man. We grew up, our toys were fake weapons and guns. Our favorite game was armies. The books that we loved were kind of stories of war, father Navy, grandfather Navy, great-grandfather Navy. Like, this is what you did in my family. You're a boy that became a man, you joined the military, and ideally you got a good war thrown in.
Right. And that concept of a good war is one of the things you explore in the book. The realities of war are not the same as the stories of glory that we consume as kids, no?
Yeah, and I think the reason why they send young men off so young, I was 17 when I went, is because at the beginning it's all this big adventure and we're kind of willing to go. We're excited to go. Like when I got deployed to the Persian Gulf, I was excited. My colleagues, my friends were jealous of me. It was where I wanted to be. I was thrilled that I got the call up.
Yeah. And the early parts of the book are very like action. It's like Tom Clancy, man. Like stuff's going on. It was like a scene from the Uncharted video game. There's boats, there's waves, stuff's blowing up. But you start infusing more and more of the stillness, the thoughts afterwards. And that's where kind of the meat of what I think you're doing. And I say think because what I love about Far Horizons is that you never go, this is what it means, right? You just tell the story, tell how it affected you, and let the reader figure it out. So why did you decide to take that approach? Because you clearly have strong opinions on war, on the morality of some of the things that happened in Kuwait and Iraq. Around the world. I mean, wow, you span 4 continents in the book.
Yeah. There's a few passport stamps in this one for sure.
Yeah, yeah. But why did you decide to leave it open-ended that way instead of just really pounding the table with the message?
It's an interesting question, Liana. Like I'm 42 years old now. I'm a father of my own two boys, and I could have written this book as a 40-year-old man and a father and a husband. But I decided not to. I decided to write it from the voice of this young man. So you get inside his head, you get his rawness and his vulnerability. There's some sex scenes, where you get, into the head of a young man who's going through these moments for the first time in his life. And I wanted to do that because I wanted to capture that time. As I was writing it, I'm biting my tongue to think, I wish I could say this and I wish I could say that from kind of perspective and wisdom, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted the story to play out as that young man went through it, and I want people to experience the ride that he went on.
Yeah, and sort of the consequences of the roller coaster. Really, I won't say it because it's spoilers and we want people to read the book. But in those last chapters, when
Mm,
you're more of an adult and you start hitting those adult walls of you can't just charge forward, you actually have to stop and start taking stock. That's where it all kind of came together for me. Was that
yeah.
deliberate?
Yeah, and I think when we see a sort of a classic story arc, it's like, the protagonist is going out there and then he has this valley and then he heads up and he finishes on the mountain. And I sort of wanted to have this like double valley. I wanted people to think like, oh, he's okay, he's off, he's found his purpose, he's figured it all out. But then some of the greatest challenges, as you say, come later in the book.
Right.
And I think, it says on the back of the book, what I do is I move from being a soldier to a humanitarian worker. So some of the greatest valleys happen in this township in East Africa. Great learnings, great struggles. I almost lose, myself in that. It's sort of real Kurt's Heart of Darkness stuff, like I think I'm doing the right thing, but I'm going deep and dark there.
Yeah, but there's also the biggest point of tension comes from young men, not much younger than you were when you went off to war. And
Mm.
these young men are fighting their own war in the final chapter. And I noticed that you talk about, was it your grandfather that wanted to be an author and didn't have the grammar, and so he just sort of quit? And so you
Yeah.
sort of start there, go through your dad, go through you, go through these young men that you were trying to mentor. You're seeing the intergenerational, all you guys are going through the same thing, multiple continents apart, multiple experiences, different wars, but certain themes persist. And what do you think are these intergenerational challenges regarding masculinity that you deal with in the book?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big one is a lot of young men, boys and young men need to still prove in their minds, they need to prove that they've got it. They've got the right stuff, that they're tough, that they can be put onto a football field, into a war zone and prove they've got it. And there's this mechanism that's talked of. It's actually created by a woman, Knight, Prince, King.
Yeah.
Knight is like, yeah, and this early stages of the book is like full knight phase. It's like slay the dragon, win the princess, fight the war. And then I sort of start to move into this prince phase of the humility and the learning and it often comes when you have children of your own.
Mhm.
So I wonder if we're still putting this pressure on our young men to say that you have to prove yourself. Like, do this, yeah, yeah. And then once you've done that, then we can talk about the more feminine sides or like, actually what you're
Right.
going through, your mental health. So in my family, we don't have guns in the house. We don't watch war movies. We don't read books about war. That's not, we've sort of broken that chain. I'm married to a Californian bohemian hippie as well, which is helping with that.
Does K-pop Demon Hunters count as a war movie?
Hey, I mean, they love the film and they love the music,
Okay,
but which
okay.
kid didn't?
So they're allowed to watch it though. Okay. Because I mean, the
Yeah.
wonderful thing about that one is it does have all the excitement. Like I'm watching this going, I didn't think I'd like it at all. I was right into it. Because
Yeah, yeah,
it
yeah, yeah. It's
is
good.
the action story, right? But you said that it's almost like boys have to earn through toughness the right to have emotions. And that's backward,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
right?
that's an interesting way to put it. And when I'm getting responses from readers on this book, I'm getting long, emotional, intense responses from women, and I'm getting like almost no responses from men or very close responses from men. I think that's also because men are barely reading these days. So I want to sort of get this book into the hands of men, and I'm encouraging women who want to see men reading more. It's like buy this for them. If it's the only book they read in the next 12 months, make it this one. So, and people are surprised as well of like, hey, you're really raw in this, and you really dig into your emotions here. Was that hard to do? And they're surprised that it's coming from a man.
That's
And
interesting.
we have emotions. We're just not great at sharing them.
Yeah, I mean, the copious amounts of alcohol in the middle part of the book are, I think we've all sort of those moments are shown in film and television as kind of these bodies, celebratory rite of passage things, and really
Mm.
they're kind of band-aids on misery.
Well,
And
I talk about this like this
Mhm.
metronome, like the piano metronome of like, I want to be good and I want to define what that is and want to help people in the world. But the other way swinging back is oblivion. And it's like the oblivion actually is where I go for part of my life. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of men do that when we're faced with the choice of like, I could sort myself out or I could just go full oblivion. We swing that way a little too often, particularly as young men.
Yeah, and I mean with the binge drinking, there's these moments where you're sitting like you're not looking at each other, you all got a beer in your hand, maybe more, and there's that kind of moment of connection before it's
Yeah.
blotted out by, getting thrown out of the bar and things like that. But I do think that's one of the few permission structures where young men are it's permissible, you're allowed to have a moment of, hey, this kind of feels bad, hey, I feel sad, hey, I miss him.
Yeah, exactly. And we're taught, all those guys in those scenes are some of the more sort of elite members of the military that I served in. So we're certainly taught to just bury that stuff. There's a mission early in the book where this guy doesn't do well. He's scared, he's fearful, and he's rattled by the mission. He brings it up. He's labeled a pussy by
Yeah.
everyone, and then we never see him again. He just gets moved on because he doesn't have what it takes. So we all learn very quickly, well, I'm not going to do that because I want to
Well,
stay in the team.
yeah, it's like this soul death. You're just removed from relevance the minute you
Yeah.
show weakness. And I mean, it's interesting because the arts are very similar. The things you talked about, working through infections, working through pain. I just did a charity shoot where I was doing cameras and shooting bands. It was 2 weeks ago. My feet are still recovering. I damaged myself so badly. And that was one thing I really connected to, that ignoring the physical damage you're doing to
Yeah.
yourself. I don't think you learn how to ignore physical pain without learning to block out emotional pain as well. What do you think about that?
I think soldiers and many men will rather die or destroy their bodies than be embarrassed. So like it's amazing what can be achieved when you've built this dynamic in a military unit of like, don't be embarrassed. And it's like run up that hill and you're like, I don't want to run up that hill, but I don't want to be embarrassed. There's seven other guys behind me. So yeah, I'll do it. I'll run up the hill.
You don't want to be the one guy that's bailing on it.
Yeah,
Okay, I want to
exactly.
pause there, go to break. Aaron Tait book is Far Horizons, out now. I couldn't put it down. I was glued. Aaron, hold over the break and we'll come back, talk more. I want to talk about how you become an individual as a man after all that kind of herd programming. Sound good for you?
Sounds great.
All right, questions, comments, any feedback. Liana at nottherapyshow.com is my email. Nottherapyshow.com is the website. At Not Therapy on social media. We'll be back with Aaron Tait talking masculinity and mental health when we come back on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back in It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. I'm still talking to the very talented writer, Aaron Tait, veteran, author of Far Horizons, humanitarian. Now, Aaron, before the break, we were talking about the herd. right? And the boys, and then you have to become a man at some point. And you're very brief on your diagnosis of PTS in the military. Was that deliberate?
I think I'm someone who will identify something and then very kind of autonomously and deliberately fix it. So I was like, okay, I've been told by a psychologist that I really respect, a military psychologist who has been there. She's been in the trenches and knows the troops. And she said, well, you're clearly suffering from this. And I said, well, how do I fix it? And it was
Hmm.
like, I had 2 hours together. And she was like, you can do this, you can do that. And I said, I think I just want to get away actually from everything and figure out who I am as an individual. And so she kind of signed off on 6 months of leave without pay. And
Hmm.
I escaped, I got away from everything, and I figured out who I was rather than being a member of a military unit. I
Right.
didn't want to be that guy anymore. So within those 6 months, I had healed myself. And also, there was a woman who helped me with that as well, Caitlin. It's just this incredible energy and spirit about her. So I wasn't sitting there in therapy. I just met someone who, sometimes all you need is love, and it worked in that instance.
My understanding. I mean, the pivotal point in that book is like you were avoiding. You were doing all these kind of um, tricks to get exactly what you were given just open permission to do the minute you walked in that office and got that diagnosis. What was that another one of those show don't tell things that you're kind of going like, look, if you say something, if you reach out, if you actually connect with somebody professionally or personally, it's a lot better than just hiding your pain.
Absolutely. And there's some readers are reaching out to me about particular scenes, and there's one scene where I jump in the ocean
Yeah.
somewhere in the world. I won't spoil it, and I have a nervous breakdown,
Yeah.
and I just kind of let it all come
Yeah.
out. But I'm a mile out to sea all by myself, and it's
Right.
the only place that I feel I can do it, and and that's okay too. I was in an Uber the other day, and the Uber driver asked him how he was. He said, "I feel sad because my son plays cricket, and he got a ball to the back of the
Oh,
head."
oh
And
dear.
he died. He passed away, this young 17-year-old. So not his son, but the
Hmm.
son, the friend of the son. And I said, you need to tell your 17-year-old boy that it's okay to cry.
Hmm.
He's got to go, and it's okay to roar off the top of a hill, to be angry, to be sad, to be all sorts of things. And he said, yeah, I asked my son last night, are you okay? And my son said, yes. And I said, hey, maybe next time you see him, just say, how are you feeling? Rather than, are you okay? Because a
Because it
17-year-old
prompts a
boy is going to
correct
say, like,
answer.
yeah, a
Hmm.
17-year-old boy is going to say, yeah, I'm fine. Leave me alone.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a really great I mean, I loved in that scene, yelling at the ocean, how it almost reclaimed like the Hemingway of that. It was the young man in the sea, but instead of all those repressive metaphors, it was a thing. And I do think that that's very insightful that if you ask a kid, are you okay? They're going to say yes because there's an expectation there. If you say it's okay to be sad or what are you feeling, that's the dialogues that you were kind of getting into. And I mean, even that was a little bit brutal how you learned to do that in the third part of the book. But
Yeah.
is that the ultimate takeaway? Because it's interesting because all through the book it's like we don't talk about this stuff, we don't talk about this stuff, we don't talk about this stuff. The book is talking about it.
Yeah.
That were you trying to just set an example instead of give a lecture?
Yeah, I think so. And I wanted to, this when I'm screaming at the ocean, it's like an intensely private moment.
Mhm.
Um, when I lose my virginity in the book, that's a moment that like only myself and that woman know about. My wife didn't know about that.
You didn't warn her?
I had a very good editor. So my editor was Alexis Washam, who worked on Sally Rooney's book Normal People. And she would say, like, these 70 pages we can kill. Great stories, good for the bar, good for the campfire, but not for the arc. But like this sentence here, There's 10 pages right
Hmm.
there. What's that? And I went, oh, it was deliberately a sentence because I didn't want to go there. And she's
Yeah.
like, well, if you're willing to go there, I think there's some magic. So the moments where I really dug in and was super raw and vulnerable, and rather than lecturing, I was like, I'm just, as you say, I'm going to show you what I went through here and be as raw as I possibly can. I think they're the moments that are connecting with readers.
Yeah, because that was the truth of I've heard a lot of very similar stories from guys in the military. You're just too tired, you're too worn out to be go out and sleeping with a bunch of different women. This idea that it's all, wine, women, and song isn't the reality. And I thought that gave men permission to not be promiscuous and still be seen as manly, for lack of a better word. Was that maybe it's a deliberate inclusion by the editor, but that something you thought about that, that was almost the bravest part in the whole book.
That sexual moment, you
Hmm.
think?
Well, I think talking about it
Yeah.
and I think slowing
Mm.
down and preserving the details because it was intimate. I mean, the the multiple languages and time almost slowed. It went from being, Black Hawk Down to the Notebook. And I was like, what's going on? And the
Yeah.
fact that it was so different to what came, it really did feel like, wow, this is really not BSing. This is a guy taking a risk here.
Yeah. And what I had to do in my life is to define my own version of good. Like I grew up in the Christian church
Yeah.
and I was told that good was the Ten Commandments. Don't do these things and you're a good man. And I kind of brought that into the military with me and I thought, okay, I'm deploying to a good war here. George Bush is praying for us. Like this is a good one. The terrorists just attacked 9/11. This is the right thing to do. And then as a 21-year-old, I'm starting to really think like that was not a good war. And those 10 rules, I don't know if that's the version of good that I want to be now. And I
Well, you
have to figure out what good means for me, what a good man means for me, and who I want to be rather than everyone else telling me what I should be.
Yeah, and the Ten Commandments are kind of difficult when you're a soldier.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a Navy warship is not a great place for a good little Christian boy, put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. It that was very cool. But I mean the whole book as a package, your editor did do a great job guiding you. But ultimately, what do you want? You say you're getting very clipped responses from other men. What
Mm.
kind of responses are you looking for? What kind of conversation do you want this to stimulate?
What I want people to do when they finish the book is to make this noise like, huh. And I want them to be thrown. I want them to have gone on a journey with me and then make a rash decision. Book a one-way flight somewhere or tell someone that they love them or leave something that they should have left a long time ago. A big mantra for me is to live deliberately. Otherwise, if you don't choose to live deliberately, everyone will choose for you. So I want women to read it and enjoy it and I'm getting that feedback, which is great. I want men, as I said before, to maybe it's the only book that they read this year. I know there's many men that read lots of books, but many are not anymore. So I want them to pick up a book and I want them to be moved. I want them to be happy, sad, frustrated, challenged. And I want them to feel like, oh, this all just happened through me sitting down without distractions and reading a book. So I want everyone to realize again that books can move people, that can change your life in a way. I can certainly think of books that changed my life as a young man, and I hope this is equally as effective for someone else in the world.
All right, Aaron Tait, if people want to find out about the book, Aaron, if they want to learn more, is there a website? Is it just go to Amazon, Google Far Horizons? How should people find out more about what you're doing?
Amazon, absolutely, it's there. I've done an Audible version as well, which is
Oh,
on
cool.
so people can listen to the book. My website is Aaron J Tait, so that's Tait .com. It's the same handle on Instagram. But yeah, appreciate the support, Liana, and thank you for reading it. I understand you finished it last night.
Yeah, it was a real pleasure. Aaron, thanks so much.
Thanks, Liana.
If you have any questions, if you're like, what's the name of that book? I can't find it. Liana at nottherapyshow.com is my email. Nottherapyshow.com is my website. At nottherapyshow on social media. How do we take, the war boys are going through everywhere in the world to something more peaceful when we come back on It's Not Therapy? The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back in It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. We're still talking about what's missing from masculinity. And I want to pick up on something Aaron Tait, author of Far Horizons, said that I thought was really profound. The idea that if you ask a man if he's okay, like, are you okay? He's going to say yes, even if it's not true. Asking them what they're feeling more open-ended will get you a more accurate response. And, if you think Aaron's comments about how his wife coming into his life really changed it, was really healing for him. If you think that was cliche, if you think that was pat, read the book, because it's a love story that involves multiple rounds of malaria infections. It is not soft, right? It is not a Hallmark movie. Relationships where people share their emotions, it doesn't just happen. And this doesn't just include romantic relationships. Families also have dynamics that encourage or discourage emotional honesty. And I'll give you an example. A client of mine sent me a text message that he had with a female family member when he tried to bring up feeling bullied by an older male family member who was her husband. Now, I'll spare you the details, but to me, the whole thing read like a domino line of people who were so invested in playing roles in a family, doing what they were supposed to do, that the older generation was just knocking down the dominoes on the younger generation. They were completely blind to the expectations and the resentment that was clear to me in their language. The first thing that jumped out at me was that his relative, the female relative, both insulted him on the grounds that he was very sensitive. I think maybe it was intended to be, I accept you the way you are, but it certainly didn't read that way, because then she expected him to be the bigger person with the husband who got described as having strong opinions. Remember that this was my client complaining that the older relative, the husband, was coming across like a bully. So strong opinions are minimizing. And I'm sure anybody who's had to deal with someone who's described as having strong opinions, they're all like, no, bully. Right. It's a common euphemism. Now, the second thing that jumped out at me was that the older female relative claimed to be totally baffled as to why my client had such an issue with the strong opinions, since if he didn't like them, he should do what her own adult children did and, in her words, blow off their parents, dismiss them, whatever, blah. Do you see the issues here? Or does this seem like the normal way families talk? Well, both are true. Normal is not always healthy. First of all, my client was framed as very sensitive in a bad way, in a difficult way, because he chose to name his feelings and speak directly. His older male relative had strong opinions because instead of saying he didn't like something, he got aggressive about various and sundry stuff. But at the same time, the older female relative tipped her hand that her and her husband's own kids don't tend to take their advice. They blow them off. which blowing off isn't just, thank you, it's not right for me. It's meh. There's an element of communicated disrespect. But oh God, heaven forbid the husband should change his approach. I was seeing the Principal Skinner meme from The Simpsons, is he a bully? No, it is the youngins who are wrong, right? I mean, seriously, maybe the guy's kids would listen to him more if he listened to them first instead of just flinging his strong opinions everywhere. Oh, but that's just silly talk. Everyone else is just too sensitive. Here's the thing. I'm going to listen twice again before I talk once. Those strong opinions, they're the flip side of the coin of being very sensitive. A truly confident person doesn't feel the need to knock over other people with their opinions. I know this about myself. When I am like, hey, I'm secure in something, I'm fine with someone else disagreeing, right? If there's something I'm sensitive about, if it hits, if it hurts, no, then I feel that, no, you're wrong, and it's never the best tactic. I know that, but I can't help myself, right? Ideally, you persuade. You don't try to bully people into not agreeing with you so much, but just shutting up about their disagreement. Persuasion, true persuasion, always starts with listening. And when someone says they felt bullied, well, they clearly didn't feel heard. My clients' relatives would, I'm just saying, probably have a better relationship with all these, next generation, these adult children, and be less blown off by their kids if they started listening to understand instead of listening to judge. But listening to understand requires a certain amount of self-confidence and a hefty dose of sensitivity in the way a microphone is sensitive. You gotta be able to pick up the little things as well as the big ones. Stuff like, how'd you feel about that? Instead of, are you okay? Stuff like asking someone why they had such a strong reaction instead of dismissing them as very sensitive or too sensitive. These are examples of phrasing things in a listening to understand way, right? Why? How did that leave you feeling? Why the big response? I stop clients a lot and go, whoa, there was a lot of emotion there. I want to be careful what happened there before we proceed, right? And this is where the training that men receive in society that causes them to handle distress better in the moment, scientifically, is getting them bad reactions from the people in their life. Remember I said I'd come back to this? Yeah, we're coming back to it. The training that women receive from society results in women becoming overwhelmed by another person's feelings because women are trained to stay with the negative emotions and make sure it's communicated that we care so very much about them, even though this tends to wear us out if we don't set decent boundaries. Hence, my client's relative, who was probably in the middle of, two fighting men, just make it go away, right? Even though I'm sure she was trying to care very much, it didn't quite make it, right? Stereotypical feminine. You ever heard this from her? Oh, you know how he is. Just let it go. Yeah, that's one of those things from older generations or people who are not as sensitive that isn't actually helpful because no one but strong opinions guy. In that scenario, just let it go. That means you're not allowed to have boundaries. You're not allowed to tell them to cut it out. You're not allowed to get up and leave. Instead, the children, the people around them, learn to be avoidant. And instead of being authentic, they just blow him off and not engage with his blowhard opinions. On the other hand, men are trained to avoid lingering on bad feelings and go directly into problem-solving mode, what my client's older male relative likely tried to do, albeit awkwardly, and that's why it came across the bully. Trying to solve the problem before you fully understand the problem means you don't end up trying to solve the correct problem, right? This makes sense when you put it that way. My client reacted in part to being lectured on a bunch of things he already knew as if he didn't already know them, but he also reacted to the lack of emotional support that the older man was displaying as he leapt to solve a problem for the younger person instead of realizing that it's best to solve problems like that together. Young men are trapped in that gap today between gendered socializations. There's a pretty big awareness that a lot of men are silently suffering, but the minute a guy tries to do anything but silently suffer, he's hit with too sensitive, too much, weak, other blow-offs by older adults of all genders. Not realizing that this is encouraging the next generation to be even more emotionally checked out and dismissive just to survive the strong opinions without being labeled sensitive. Here's the thing. We want our young adults to be sensitive like microphones, so they'll pick up subtleties, because that's where new good ideas come from. You can't teach a young man to listen until he feels heard himself. And anyone who works with audio knows that if you're getting feedback on a microphone, you have to either distance it from the source or turn down the sensitivity. But if you turn down the sensitivity, you can't hear as much. Human relationships are like that too. People will take more from your example than your advice. So if you want them to follow your advice, don't reject them in your example. And calling out a young man for excessive sensitivity is a rejection, whether that's convenient to you or not. We want young people to learn to listen to their bodies and their hearts, understand their own values, and live in accordance with them. Because that's the path to happiness and self-confidence. And if someone's sensitivity is turned down really low just so they can survive, they're not going to pick up the subtleties of messaging that are so important to both survival and success. That sensitivity is often what's missing from masculinity. Questions, comments, concerns, any feedback, Liana at nottherapyshow.com. Nottherapyshow.com is the website. Not Therapy Show is the social medias. I am out of time. Thanks for spending this time with me. Check out Aaron Tait's Far Horizons. You're crazy is only a problem if it's hurting you. See you next time.